18 here. I'd like to call the Will County Land Use and Development Committee special meeting to order. If you'll all please rise. And Janet, do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Best Pledge of Allegiance I've heard all day. Okay, Dawn, will you please?
Frankie Kratzel.
Here?
Here.
Katie Dean Schlotman. Bob Mitchell.
Here.
Terry Newquist. Terry Williams. And Joe Van Dyke.
Okay, we do have a quorum, correct? All right, good deal. I don't think we have any minutes to approve, so we'll go right on to new business. First up on the agenda, procedures of development of agricultural / former agricultural properties or drainage issues. So I will open this right up to Chair Ogala. If you want to kind of tee us up on this agenda item. No. This is the procedures of development of agricultural / former agricultural properties or drainage issues. So specifically, I believe this was related to solar projects, but
Okay. so
drainage issues.
One thing I want to talk with you guys about, and it's been an issue, is when somebody wants to build a house out in the country, buy an ag parcel, whether it's they get the permits and they're able to do it. But what I find is the problem is that they don't always do tile study. So that can cause problems with flow. So like rural subdivision, I know they have to go with the drainage. Yeah, but I'd like you guys to consider, and maybe they can jump up and jump in, is to have that done as well, because you have somebody, let's say they're moving from, Tinley Park. They live in town. Don't even know what a septic field is. They lived prior to Chicago. They have no idea. They don't understand that in the country, our storm system, shield is on it. Our storm system is our field tiles that drain into the ditches. From the ditches, they drain to the just next time.
There you go.
There you go. Sorry. Okay, I'll start again because I wasn't on at all. And okay, so when somebody moves from a place like Tinley Park and maybe they lived in Chicago and they move to the country because they want to have a little farmette or whatever, or 5 or 10 acres to live on, they don't understand how our drainage systems work in the country, right? Because they lived in a place you had sewers, right? Well, there is no sewer in the country, and so you have to have, our fields are drained for farming by drain tiles. And then the drain tiles will go a certain way down to a ditch of some sort. And from the ditch, it'll run maybe more ditches to finally ends up in a creek. So what I have found in Green Garden Township, when a large rural subdivision was in, that it caused flooding in other areas. So I don't know if the developer did it or what, but of course the land had previously been A1. And then some is just, we had that parcel, it was a Baumgartner parcel in Will Township, was like 15 acres maybe it was, and they split it into 3 5s. And then somebody started building in one, and that caused issues for the surrounding farmers that caused flooding. So my understanding is we don't have them do any kind of a field tile study. So obviously when their developer starts building, they're going to go in and dig their hole for the basement, foundation, and everything. But you may not see any impact, like if we just got out of a drought, when we're still kind of in a drought, right? So there's no water running at all. So you wouldn't see an impact possibly from them hitting something if there's a new developer never also worked in the country. I would assume they should know this, but you never know. And then later on, when we have the big rains, then you have a lot of flooding issues. That I built a new house. Dawn's lived there in her farmhouse for years. And now suddenly I'm flooding her front yard because I did something that I didn't know I shouldn't, that I didn't know about. So I just kind of want to have the conversation for the board, this committee to possibly look at changing the ordinance, that if you were taking an A1 or an A2 parcel and making it residential, or you may even keep it A1 or A2, but when you're going to build a new house, that we have a field tile study done so that you don't negatively impact, like get it done ahead of time, just like with solar, we have them do the field tile study ahead of time so they know where they are, because they're gonna hit something somewhere. And then they can rectify it prior or during or whatever, so it doesn't impact. And it could, during building, you're always gonna have impacts, that's different. But once you're done and everything's built, I should never flood her front yard again. You know, so that's a thought. And maybe Brian, I mean, I'm not sure everything that they have to do, but I know this is a problem in the country.
So, oh, we'll get to. No, I don't have a question. No, I mean, here's the thing. So if I'm building I just got married, I'm building a home for my wife and I, and we plan on having kids. And during construction, I notice, hey, we cut right through the middle of a drain tile. I'm fixing it, right? Because it's affecting me. The challenge is I'm developing 100 properties or residences on an old farm, or maybe I'm putting a solar farm in, and I cut into one of these. And like, it's going to cost me a bunch of money. Hurry up and fill that hole in. Like, I ain't fixing it. And then, to Judy's point, we have a rainy season and it's flooding all the downhill people or all the uphill people or whatever. It might flood the uphill people because I cut the tile now and it has nowhere to go. So it's important that we have or at least include this in the ordinance. Yeah, I'm just reading through the minutes from when this was discussed in our meeting. Member Newquist says, when someone breaks a tile or tiles, are they not required to repair it? Collins says the ordinance requires the maintenance of these tiles. If there's a known issue, we will investigate. Many times people correct this on their own. So we are, again, kind of expecting people to do the right thing. I'm hopeful that most of the time they do, but we probably do need to make sure, right? So we'll go to Raquel.
Okay, so currently we don't have this in, in our ordinance at all, that they have to do this. And if it's in there, like, what is the liability of that? Like, if we put that in there, say if I'm building a property, I'm not saying that it shouldn't, I just wanted to know, I'm trying to look at the whole situation. If we say that, oh, we want to build this property, and there's a drain tile, and I didn't know that it was broken because I'm not out there every day. I'm working while they're building my house, right? I'm not building it with my own hands, and they don't cover it up. What's our liability? What would be my liability, given that that's in the ordinance? I'm not trying to lawyer it up or either. I'm just curious. The homeowner, the person who's building the property. Right. So are we adding ramifications to the ordinance? All right, there we go. Okay, so
Right, it's for
Okay.
discussion, right?
So
Go
this
ahead.
is kind of for staff. In the past, I know I've spoken either to some of you, maybe Owen, Colin, about this very same issue. And it was expressed that if we were to require a drain tile study, they're quite expensive. And I think even Lynn at Soil and Water said, yeah, they can be expensive. So, it is what it is. If they're expensive, they're expensive. But I just want to point that out, that I have been told that these studies are a little pricey. Now, second point, I want staff's feedback on this. This requirement, if we were to put it in the ordinance that a drain tile study is required, we know that that would be completed by the contractor or the developer, not the homeowner. They don't know how to do this. So if we put that in the ordinance, is that something that the contractor would have to provide to you and check off that box, right? Because the homeowner can't do the study. It's got to be the appropriate engineering company. So how would that work? If we place it in the ordinance?
Yeah. All right, Brian Redner from the Land Use Department. I'm going to try and address a couple of the questions that have been raised and maybe give a little bit of background info on when a permit's required, when it's not, and whether somebody is doing a drain tile study. So for solar farms, the drain tile study is required. So that is being done. It is being reviewed. County already requires that. For new subdivision development, a drain tile study would be done, okay? And that is going to apply to anything that is a subdivision. The problem that Julie is talking about is that in rural areas, if you divide land over 5 acres or greater, it's not a subdivision. It's an exempt act under the Plat Act. So
Did that include the Baumgartner subdivision?
correct. The Baumgartners was not, they came through for the rezoning, which the county board granted. And they wanted to have 5 acre lots or greater. So because of that, it's a division of land that's just recorded at the recorder's office and done through our mapping and platting office. And because of that, when we look at what the water resource ordinances have in place, is that there's an exemption for the development of property 5 acres or greater from not requiring a professionally engineered site plan. And because we don't require a site plan, we're not getting the drain tile study. So
we need to remove that exemption. Correct.
that's something
We-
for this committee to
Right.
consider to determine if you feel that's appropriate. With regards to subsurface drainage, there's already ordinances in place that, as we've talked about, that talk about you have to maintain subsurface drainage. So if you do come across a drain tile during construction activity and it's broken, it has to be repaired or rerouted. So that's already an ordinance requirement. So somebody asked a question about liability. So if somebody violated the code and it was discovered later on, which is going to be discovered because there's going to be water issues, then the county would have the ability to try and have the situation corrected through a hearing, administrative adjudication process or a legal process. That's what we do with all of our ordinances. And so we do have that option at our hands. So there is a process for dealing with people that have violated the code. There are exemptions in place for certain size lots, and we already are requiring drain tile studies on certain types of development that, this committee and board is concerned about.
All right, so I misspoke on the solar and on a subdivision, you're calling it, it's already required.
Mhm.
So really, we just have the one missing piece, which is these large estate projects. What's that?
A big house in the country.
A big house in the country, right?
Well, this
It was 5 acres or under,
right.
correct, Brian?
Yeah, just keep.
So I'll just leave it on.
Yeah.
Yes, if it's a 5 acres or greater, then the site development permit is not required. Now, let me specify, that is going to be the case if there is no floodplain or wetland on the property. If there is floodplain or wetland on the property, then we are going to require a site plan and a site development permit. So there's another exemption for 2.5 acres, that if your structure or the impacted area is below 3,000 square feet, then a site plan is not required as well.
So I want to add that we had a neighbor put a 3-story addition, including a basement, wound up being 5 feet from the property line. And no one had any knowledge of it. And we have had flooding in our backyard ever since. And the city said, well, you need to put in a French drain. And I'm like, how did this ever get approved? So even a small addition on a parcel can create havoc for the neighbors. We cannot grow grass anymore. I mean, it's like a mud pit. Nothing will grow other than some, perennials. So it completely changed our backyards, and not just mine, but everybody touching it. So I think we need to focus on those particular exemptions. We want to talk about removing those exemptions. I think that's part of the problem.
Do you live in unincorporated?
No, I live in Incorporated, and they came out and they said, well, and my arborist said they changed the grade. And, of course, the city says, well, no, they didn't. The arborist said they did. But then result is we're all living with it. So,
I think I totally agree.
Yeah.
I don't think that's relevant to what we're talking about. This is
We're talking-
specifically about
we're-
agricultural properties and drain tiles.
no, we're also, oh, go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead.
I wasn't trying to interrupt that discussion. I also wanted to address the point, I believe it was Board Member Berkowitz who mentioned cost. So yes, there's going to be a cost to to the county's residents if they want to develop an unincorporated Will County. If you're gonna require a site plan, that's something to consider. It has to be prepared by a professional engineer. They're gonna have to hire a consultant to go out and do the drain tile study. I just wanted to raise these issues so that the committee is aware of that. The cost will be in the thousands. So you have to consider that. And then also, there's a limited amount of consultants out there that provide this drain tile work. So the county would be introducing something that I'd say is relatively new and not done in other counties for this level of development, and could be putting quite a demand on the service providers right now. So it could take a longer time for them to have a plan done, submitted to our office, and get through the permitting process.
So could you provide to us what the neighboring counties do? Bring that back to us. I'd like to know, what does DuPage do? What does Kendall? What does Kane? So we've got something to look at. So I think this might be a little premature. Let's get that information. Let's find out what our neighbors are doing. How do they address this, or what are their practices?
Yeah, we could do that.
Member Mitchell.
Okay, so yeah, we just had a question over here. Like when you say in the thousands, are we talking about a couple thousand? Or are we talking about 50,000? Where are we?
Maybe I defer to my professional engineer.
I'm curious. I'm just curious. Like ballpark it.
Needs to come up.
I'm not saying that I want anybody to pay 2,000 either. We're just curious as to how much.
It's a fair question.
Yeah,
Because the last thing I want to do is make it
burdensome.
way more difficult on anybody that wants to move into Will County. We have a pretty aggressive fire chief in New Lenox
Mhm.
that's been banging this drum about every unincorporated home, new construction. He wants to put the fire suppression system in, which is like between $20,000 and $30,000.
No
They have to
way.
put a water tank in the yard. They have to have
Mm.
pumps, and it makes people say, I ain't building an unincorporated. Then
Right.
forget it.
Right.
And
right.
some of these people already have lots. That's the last thing I want to do is turn people away but at the same time, there may be an issue here, and maybe there's nothing we can do. Maybe there's something, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts on that.
Put his mic on.
Bruce Adderman, so county engineer. There's a lot of, I guess, a lot of variables on cost. Is it along frontage, along the edge? How much?
It's next to Judy's house.
Nothing. I live in an island.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things you have to look at for cost. How much area is upstream? What's tributary to it? Is it 5 acres or is it 500 acres? I mean, that makes a difference as far as,
Well, right now, 5 acres, because we're not doing a subdivision.
right, if
So-
there's 5 acres that's upstream of this,
Mhm.
is it worth spending a couple $1,000s to trench across your lot through a low area where things will be draining? you know, that's a call everybody's gonna have to make. But, and again, if they hit it, well, then they have to relocate it. But, you know, if there's 500 acres that are tributary or, you know, a 100-acre farm field and you're smack in the middle of it, you're almost guaranteed that there's going to be a drain tile that's going to be cutting through that property. So, you know, is it just a one trench and you have 300 feet of depth in your lot and it's just a single trench? You know, it could be $1,000, $2,000 project. But if it's, you know, a long length and you got multiple tributary areas, it's exponential. So it has to be on a case by case basis.
So this is nothing that you can call Julie for, right?
No, well, I've seen them find it with willow roots and willow sticks and, you know, the divining rods. They do find it with divining rods and even copper wire. I've seen them do it.
But we do have to remember that this is coming before us because of the impact it causes when these drain tiles are broken or removed. I mean, it causes considerable property damage to other people. And I experienced it myself with new construction. And, you know, that and every farmland that we lose in incorporated, we see more and more flooding. So I know that these are all related. These project development in general impacts water issues. So we need to have some way to correct the situation. If we don't require this, we need to have the ability to go in there and to correct the problem, because it's not fair to the adjoining property owners. And we just had that horrific case prior. I'm not going to reference it. We all know what it was, where these neighbors are living through horrendous times. So if we can put something in there that puts the responsibility on the contractor, okay? You're a developer, get it done. We maybe should consider that, because at the end of the day, usually the people coming in building, they're prepared. They pick that parcel out. They want to live there. They're prepared. You typically find sometimes money is no object for them. So let's remember the impact and why we're having this conversation, because it can really destroy existing neighborhoods and homes. So
Yeah, money's always an object to everybody, but I do agree. So do you have another comment on this?
Well, just the fact that having the conversation is good. And then we've asked them for some more information. I think what Bruce replied was good, because it kind of gave you a feel for it. But the negative impact that can happen, and there's a place out in the country on Peatone Beach Road. It has 4 or 5 houses, and that was done back in the time when there were a lot less restrictions. And they flood themselves there because they hit a field tile, and it was a large farm acreage, and nothing got done back then for whatever reason. And if you have a big drought area, you're never even going to see it for a long time. You know what I mean?
Can I
And
just,
when you have the
sorry.
big rains, you do see it then. So that is a negative to anybody in the area, and including a farmer. A farmer can be negatively impacted. Down in Peatone, there's a new huge truck stop that's also going to have a hotel that's being built. And the way they said it, they have a couple retention ponds and everything like that. Doesn't matter because of all the asphalt and everything. Yes, some gets there and some is still going to run off, because depending on how fast that water's coming down, it's not going to go in that drain, right, to hit the retention pond. And then that ended up rushing across the street through the ditches and then bled out into the farmer's field. So now, and Nick Palmer's now the new village administrator, has called me up and he asked, well, what about this? I told him who we should contact and everything. So that does cause an impact. So this guy developed it, and he even followed everything that they suggested, yet there was still something that needs to still be done. So I appreciate you guys hearing this and, considering doing something about it, and may not pass right now, may not be for a while, but I think it's really important to consider a change. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Bruce?
Well, one thing that you could also look at is, and what Brian had mentioned to me was, well, then we require a site plan, and an engineered site plan could range, again, from, $2,000 to $10,000. Again, it depends all on the site. And then you add on top of that the drain tile survey. Now, you could remove the drain tile requirement from site plan and just have it as a separate, saying, hey, if I've got a lot and there's a wetland here and it drains, but you don't see a storm sewer anywhere, it's a pretty good indication that there's a drain tile that would drain that field or drain that parcel. So maybe you remove the drain tile requirement from the site plan and have it as a separate action. And then at least they're not paying for another engineer to do something as opposed to maybe a contractor. And when you say the contractor is to pay for it and do it, honestly, the homeowner's ultimately responsible. They're paying for it, not the contractor.
I know.
It has to
I
go through the
understand that.
homeowner and not necessarily a contractor, because you want everything responsible party, which would be that property owner. But, one of the things you might want to look at is just removing it from the site plan requirement and do it as a separate issue.
How does staff
No.
feel about that?
But if you remove it from the site plan, what's the negative there? I mean, can we do something where, we do a site plan for what reasons do they have to do a site plan? You said for subdivision, obviously solar, what other things?
Yeah, so why do we do like site plans? There's lots of other things, commercial development,
Yeah, right.
industrial development. But what I was, for whatever reason, the board decided years ago, long time ago, that if it was more than 5 acres, that you didn't need to go through all of these requirements of hiring an engineer. So, maybe the board still feels that way, but maybe you do want a drain tile study done. And if you removed it from the site plan requirement and still required a drain tile study on a certain size development, that way they wouldn't have to hire a professional engineer to do an engineering plan if you still felt it was appropriate that if you got 5 acres and it provided there's no floodplain or wetland, you can not have a site plan prepared, but we would still get the drain tile plan, so we would know where they were at on the site, and then we could work with the homeowner or contractor when they're developing it to make sure they have that addressed during construction.
So when they did that, they had a 15-acre parcel that they split into 3. That was not a subdivision then?
No, because it's exempt division of land under the Plat Act.
Yeah.
So when it's 5 acres or greater, then we're not part of that development process. We only see it on the back end when they come to develop each lot. And
Oh,
because it's 5 acres or greater, it's exempt.
Okay, so it's a catch, yeah.
All right. Thanks for getting the surrounding counties' current
Yeah.
plan for that, and we'll revisit this down the road.
One other question. So could we you guys know or suspect if there's drain tiles on that particular parcel, correct?
When it's in a rural area and it's,
Right.
agricultural, and you can see the lay of the land, and there's lower spots, you can assume that there's something.
So could we just require that this study be done if we are confident that there are drain tiles on the parcel? Can we require it?
I don't know. There's a
Oh,
potential that
Matt's
it could
waving
get a
his
little
hand
messy
there.
because
Yeah.
Oh.
Right. So it's possible, Julie, that if they took these 15 acres, just the lay of land, there were no drain tiles maybe going through that section of the whole 160 acre farm per se, right? That could be the case. You can't know whether it truly is or isn't, but I'll tell you, you can tell when there's drain tile problems when you're driving, because you have some areas that are just flooding all the time, even with a little bit of rain. So maybe staff can kind of give us some good guidelines. I think they know what we're kind of
Yeah.
saying.
Well,
here.
I'm about to say, isn't it ties into what you're saying? I want to,
Go
yeah.
ahead, Kyle.
why don't we have like, for every utility, there's a map of where, I mean, why don't we have this? Why does this not exist already? Because it's the country and they do what they want.
Well,
There's a lot of reasons, no?
I mean, drain tiles are usually done by the private property owner and the farmers. Now, they have a lot better records as far as how they put these in, where they put them in, and they're actually laid out. Before, you had a field that didn't drain, you just trenched in a tile and you put it in, and nobody kept records of it. So, but now they're keeping better records. So, there may be where you have plans, but even 20 years ago,
They weren't doing it.
not really, no. So, it's even hard enough in municipalities that have plans to even make sure that they're correct. You run across that all the time.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
So, but yeah, you don't always know. But there is a good indication. You can see, like what Brian's saying, there's lay of the land. And again, if there's only 2 acres tributary upstream of it, is that really going to have a drain tile in it? No. So do you need to have a tile study? And they may even, somebody go out and walk the site and say, no, there are no tiles. I mean, that's all, and sometimes that's all it takes.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Bruce, thank you for being here. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, zoning notifications and procedures. Again, I'll just kind of remind everybody why why we're talking about this today. Back on June 11th, Member Mitchell, during Land Use and Committee meeting, expressed a concern about improving the notification process for zoning cases. And how to make it easier, how to get the message out more than we currently are. I've talked to staff about this, and they kind of have told me that a lot of time does already go into this. There's somebody that individually has to look at a computer screen and find which surrounding homes or businesses need to be contacted. And when we make this harder, or when we expand this, it makes it harder on them and their team. And they're not afraid of the work, it's just resources, right? So we do have systems in place. Maybe we should start with what we currently do, and then we can decide on if we want to expand on that or not. Is that, Colin, are you getting ready to? So I have seen this. So like right now, if you have a zoning case, they tell you have to put a sign out. And that sign, the letters have to be, 2¼ inches. And if people follow the rules, you should be able to see it, because these are paragraphs almost being put on it. So the sign has to be like 8 feet by 4 feet, like
No.
a sheet of plywood.
So,
It's supposed to. That doesn't mean
so
we're
what
doing.
I've sent to staff is pictures of handwritten signs on those chloroplast boards, laying on the ground, laying in the street. They don't work. And that was the site on Wolf's Crossing was one of those sites. Municipalities, surrounding municipalities, Naperville's one of them. Every commercial site or industrial site has a 3.5-foot sign, sturdy wooden construction with a printed, not a hand printed with ink, but a printed sign. So people driving by can read it. It's legible. It doesn't fade in rain. And there's one up there right now on Route 59. And I was going to take a picture of it, but I couldn't stop but we all know what I'm talking about, what I'm looking at. That's what I would like us to put in our ordinance, because all the other surrounding municipalities require it. I'm not talking about residential, but industrial and commercial, because when I get phone calls, it's when they see these signs. And I get phone calls all the time about Naperville projects, because they don't know the difference between Naperville and county. But it works. The right signage works. And so I would like that improvement made to our.
All right, Colin, go ahead and tell us
Okay.
what the current,
Okay, so what we have, we want to make sure what we're talking about when we say we put up signs. We put up signs for properties, oops, wait. There we go. For variances. Now, variances are regarding the lot and not the use. We're talking about the basically any numerical item within our zoning code is for a variance. It does not affect the use at all, but we do require the same, statute requires the same notification of publication, posting, and what am I missing? Adjoining property owners. Yes, thank you. And then we have the special use permits. They do change the use, but it does not change the zoning. And they require the same type of notification. And then lastly, the map amendments. This changes not only the use, but the underlying zoning district. So from ag to industrial or ag to residential would be the common ones. So all three of these require the same type of notifications. Okay, so any questions on those, the three types? Okay, all right. So the notifications are publication, published in a newspaper of general circulation at least 15 days prior, but no more than 30 days before the public hearing. Also post signage on the property at least 15 days and no more than 30 days prior to the public hearing, and then notify all adjoining property owners by certified mail. Now, for the newspaper publications, any newspaper of general circulation in Will County qualifies, but we do recommend, based on the geographic location of the project, the Herald News, Wilmington Free Press, the Vidette, or the Farmers Weekly Review. It all depends where it is, but also it depends on the scheduling of the public hearing and the publication schedule of the newspaper. So it may be something out east that needs publication, but the Vidette is not publishing during that time that we need the publication, so it goes to the Herald News. And we can't delay the publication or the meeting because we have the schedule we have to keep following within the ordinance. Nope, that's right. And then for the sign postings, we've got a litany of items that we need to address. There needs to be at least one sign posted every 500 lineal feet of the street frontage on any street, either whether it's a corner or you got a front street to the front and the street to the back. It doesn't matter which. And again, no more than 15 to 30 days. Then we clarify it through our records that there's a sworn certification that it was published, preferably with photographic evidence that's given to us. And then the applicant then has 5 days after the conclusion of the public hearing to remove those signs. However, this is the important part. The zoning administrator may modify the zone posting requirements of the section when it's deemed, when it's found the current requirements are inappropriate. So the zoning administrator can include modifications such as the content, the format, the size, the materials, the location, and the quantity of those signs. And that's at the zoning administrator's discretion. So it can be done under the current ordinance. And so this is the sign that the that was posted for the large solar farm down in the Wilmington area. This was posted on every property, at every corner of every street, on every property that was affected. So, yeah. So this has all the same information that was discussed. So here, so we'll stop here. Any questions on postings?
Some background as to why we are even doing this, if you
Yeah.
don't mind. Okay, so just as a refresher for those who weren't at those meetings that we discussed this, what happened was a constituent came to me and said somebody, one of her neighbors' garage was burned down. And so she did see a sign on the property that said, oh, there's going to, public hearing or whatever, because she assumed, like all the other neighbors, that he was just going to replace his garage or shed or whatever it was that burned down. So everyone was like, okay. They didn't get anything in the mail. It was sent to the HOA. So none of the residents. Now, just so happens, but it doesn't matter, but this isn't a situation where before we were talking about whether or not you're renting an apartment. These are $1 million plus homes. So none of the people were notified, only the HOA was notified. So when they found out that the gentleman who was replacing his garage, instead of replacing his garage, is like building this like behemoth of a corrugated steel building with awnings on each door, they were like, what? They weren't expecting this. So there was nothing so at least if the neighbors had gotten notified that there was going to be a meeting about this, maybe those who are more inclined to go to those meetings would have gone and they would have known what the plans were. That's A, but they didn't because it went to the HOA. And secondly, they have a notice. Sure, there was a sign posted out there, but it didn't say, hey, I'm going to put a behemoth of a garage shed thing out there that is not fitting and not in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. Where it is so awkward. It's like you have homes and then there's like, okay.
Sorry. So we'll get into the letter notification in just a moment. I just, as for signage, so you're looking for increasing the description to include whatever the purpose of the individual purpose of the project.
Yes, and I've seen them. I've seen
Yeah,
it say,
yeah.
proposed a Toys R Us is going here or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah,
Okay, so you want the purpose in.
that would help.
Okay. Okay, that's easily enough.
Garage behemoth.
Okay, now, so anything else on the sign postings?
So, Colin.
Yes.
What you just displayed is perfect, but that's not what's happening. All the signs, the pictures I sent you, these were handwritten. You can't, they're not legible. It's,
Okay. Are you
It-
talking about the ones that we provide to?
nope, you didn't provide them. Whoever,
Okay.
But they do give specifications of.
Well,
what
they
require.
weren't- they didn't comply with them then, and I sent you pictures
Exactly.
for that one. And I'm trying to send you the picture from the Wheatland Township Industrial Park, but my phone is not cooperating. But it was the same situation, handwritten, illegible, laying in the weeds. And again, nobody knew the sign was there. So I'd like consistency. What you just showed us is perfect, but I'm never seeing that. And I send you guys pictures. So I want to make sure that everybody puts up a sign like that.
Okay, that, you do realize that's an 8x4 piece of plywood.
Well, it doesn't have to be 8x4, but it was printed in,
Oh, yeah.
okay?
Okay,
It
so-
wasn't handwritten with a marker, which is what I see in my district. you know?
Do you guys not require a certain font, a certain size
Yeah,
letter?
we hand them we hand them a sign.
Okay, so that
You,
you're already doing
You're-
what you're asking.
we did not have a sign on
I
Wolf's
think The
Crossing.
challenge might be that we're not, and I think you said you asked them to verify this with Margie and sign something that says they did it. And I even heard you want a picture of it. So
There
if
was,
you're doing that, then this shouldn't happen.
well, it's happened and I sent pictures in. The sign was laying, do you remember, Brian? The sign was laying in the weeds. And it was a handwritten in marker. And I have another example on my phone, which I cannot get to cooperate, but it's that last parcel. And it was a handwritten sign in the weeds.
So I know the sign that you're talking about. I remember the zoning case. The sign itself is the standard sign that the office gives to the applicants, and the only thing that's handwritten is the zoning case.
You mean the board? It's not the sign. You give them that board?
Yeah, no,
that
the whole thing,
corporate-
it's already printed up with everything except for
No,
the zoning
I
case.
never saw that on Wolf's
So-
Crossing. I went there myself.
Well, I mean, I think that you made a good point that it wasn't very visible from the right of way. Wolf's Crossing's up a little bit, the property's down, there's overgrowth. That's not even 500 feet wide, so, you know, and who knows, maybe it got blown over in the wind too on top of that. So one thing that we started doing in the office, based on the feedback we heard from this committee, was starting to require larger signage like the one that was displayed up here for certain types of projects. And Margie had that authority under what the code has now under zoning administrator discretion on when an alternative signage would be done. It was just done for the AZ Hard Rock Bolingbrook Quarry case. I believe we're doing it for all new solar cases that are coming forward now. And we talked about doing it for every industrial rezoning request. So we have started doing that, even though the code doesn't say it has to be done. We recognize that this committee thought it was a concern, and we've started asking people to do that and making that the requirement for certain types of uses. Now, if this committee wants to say, as long as legal says okay, that for all types of requests in this category, then we want this larger sign. We can do, I mean, that can be done. I know that other communities, I'm not sure about Naperville, but I know Plainfield does, because I just saw one the other day, Oswego does. They still allow the smaller sign for like the variance request. If it's just a one lot, not changing the use, as Colin mentioned, hey, I want to have an extra 200 square feet of accessory storage, or I want to do an addition that encroaches into the setback, they still allow the smaller sign in those communities. So I don't know what Naperville does, but you could choose that in this category, we want this, in this category, we want that.
So I just, it finally worked and I emailed a picture of a sign, sent it to Judy, Frankie, and all of you. This sign was not legible at the end of the cul-de-sac. I was standing 20 feet in front of it before I could even read it.
I think what
And this sign,
that's already outside of what they're requiring.
Yeah, that sign that you just sent me,
Yeah.
it's not something that,
They already have requirements in
it
place.
is a handwritten sign.
Brian,
Have you seen that
that's
before?
exactly what was on Wolf's Crossing. Okay,
Yeah, that's
What-
not ours.
so here's my question to you. Why isn't there an appropriate sign there? Even the surrounding neighbors are like, that's pathetic. Because
Well, that's like saying,
why,
the speed
so
limit-
my,
that's like saying the speed
That
limit's
meets the
45, why they do
criteria?
60.
so let's change the criteria to require that it be a sign that's not handwritten.
They do that already, Julie. That's what we're trying to tell you.
Frankie, look at the picture. There was
You're
no
not-
sign
Ju-
on that
Julie.
parcel.
Listen, it's like saying the speed limit's 45, why are they doing 65? We can't, changing the speed limit's not going to make a difference. They already
So-
have a requirement.
So okay. So as land use, for that particular case, they did not have anything but that sign. So your position is it is what it is, right?
That's not the
Or what?
position at all.
Let them finish,
Well,
Frankie.
You're not letting them finish.
Thank you. That sign is of correct size and has all the correct information. Yes, it is hard to read because it's handwritten, but it has all the information. So it is a legal sign. But we now have and have had our own set of signs that we physically hand the applicants. What they decided not to use it. They decided to use their own. It has even more information than the ones we give out. So it's just,
So when they apply for the permit, you don't have anything in there that says you must display the sign that we provide to you?
no,
We can't do that?
we
We
could.
can't say you must display the sign?
You must display a sign.
We can't say this sign?
Well,
We don't have the ability to do that?
well,
Marguerite?
So I can shed some light. When we, as zoning administrator, or staff feels that we need the larger sign, we basically put in our official notice to the applicant that they need to use a certain template. We have a minimum requirement, I believe it's 4 feet by 3 feet sign. And we kind of instruct them on where to put it based
And
on
you-
preference. With this particular zoning case, we did give them that information and the diagram. It was their choice to handwrite it instead of contacting a sign company to get them made. Most of the time, a sign company does make these, installs them. You see the case of the solar farm in Custer Park. A lot of the solar farms do it as well. And it's the applicant then submitting an affidavit saying that they're, providing notification to that standard.
So as a county, we don't have the ability to say it cannot be handwritten? We can't say it?
Based on their reactions, they've never seen it before.
I'm asking them,
Don't you?
I can show you Wolf's Crossing.
We all understand that you saw this, but like, it's a one-off
ahead, Dawn.
thing.
So it,
And you aren't, I will call on people, okay? I know you keep
Okay,
doing
sorry.
it, but go ahead, Dawn.
so with each zoning case, when the applicant comes in and we know they have a zoning case, they fulfill their adjoining landowner requirements, they come in for their sign. So each one of our signs that we give to the applicants are double faced. We write on there with big bold marker their case number and instruct them, make sure each side of the road where people are driving could see the case number. And just like you, Julie, we get phone calls galore. I just saw a case in which we tell them, this is where it's going to be heard. This is what it's about. For the sign that you're talking about, they probably said, could we do our own sign? We gave them the instructions and that's what they did. So it probably was a blur. But unfortunately, that's what they choose to do under our instructions. So I
Could you
think
add a-
that's what happened.
Could you add a requirement that specifically says use this font? That would eliminate any homemade signs. New Havelka, new Courier.
Oh, you're so funny.
Of the template we send, we say it's 4-inch minimum for notice of public hearing, 2 inches.
Oh, she's off.
So notice of public hearing, when we do the alternative signage, like the image shown, it's a minimum of 4 inches for the title, notice of public hearing, and then the text, it's minimum of 2 inches for letter heights, black lettering. So typically with the template, it kind of instructs the sign company or whoever is doing alternative signage is, if they choose to do it themselves, what the minimum requirements are for size of font, and things like that.
You could add size and actual font, though. That would eliminate
You
any
could.
homemade signs. And it wouldn't increase the burden on these people at all unless they're planning on doing it with a Sharpie. Which we're
Unless they
trying
have
to
really
eliminate.
neat handwriting.
Yeah, but if you put, it has to be in New Havelka,
Yeah.
then they're gonna be like, I better send this, whatever. The sign company will know. Courier knew. So maybe that is a solution. Sounds like it's not a huge issue with the homemade signs, but could we make that change?
Yep.
Okay, so we've beat science to death. Do we want to now move on to the notification process?
Yep. Okay, so notification to adjoining property owners is the minimum that's required by statute. So Will County does that. The only ones that do above and beyond are Grundy County at 500 feet beyond, and Kane County at 250 feet beyond, and Kendall County does 500 feet beyond if it's in the A1 district. So that's how it shakes out locally. For comparison, so I took some recent cases. So this is in Wheatland Township. The adjacent number of properties was 14 properties. And the total cost for the send out was $134, $35. But if you expand it to a 500-foot radius, it would be 21 properties at $200. Then we have the VFW Hall in Plainfield Township. Number of adjoining properties was 10, but if you expanded it out to 500 feet, it'd be 37 properties with an increase of from almost $100 to $350. And then this is out in Frankfurt Township in Frankfurt Square. And the adjacent properties was 8 properties at $77 and a 500-foot radius. In this case would be 61 properties getting up close to $600 instead of the original 77. So those are what the impacts would be to the applicant at just the 500-foot radius. Additional notification beyond that would then start getting exponentially larger. And it has to be to the property owner. We don't know who the resident is. It's always to the property owner because that's what's in the tax records.
That's determined by their tax bill.
Correct.
So in all of those examples, us making it going from 250 to 500 or even 1,000, whatever, would not have solved Raquel's issue. So it's not
Correct.
necessarily how the range or how many people we're sending it to. It's more what's the content of the letter or the notification. Is that correct? Accurate?
No,
So the issue isn't that, the issue wouldn't have been outside that, that radius, because it was in the radius.
Yep.
It was sent to the HOA.
correct.
It wasn't sent to the addresses.
Correct.
That's the problem. Probably because this was a newly developed subdivision. And so maybe your records weren't updated because at the time this happened, the person I'm talking about lived in this property for about a year. So at least, so your records weren't updated. So I'm like, why wasn't it sent to the, and maybe a couple of the neighbors were, but most of the neighbors were there already. So I'm just wondering why it wasn't sent to the actual addresses where the property was. And it's fairly new. I'd say that, maybe within the last 5 years, the subdivision came to be.
Right, but that it's, I'll let Margie.
I believe with that zoning case, if I'm thinking of the correct one,
Mhm.
usually with newly platted subdivisions and developments, if there are in municipalities, they don't get reflected in GIS. And that's what we base our, abutting property information, how we determine the list of abutting. Since mapping and planning only updates those once a year with the tax bills, we don't have access to see if there's actually structures built there. We don't actually do like a curbside survey to see what addresses are, whose records living there. We have to wait for the records from mapping and platting and the treasurer's office to be populated for us to then take that information and send via certified mail. It is the applicants. We've had some applicants mention to us that properties, they're friendly with neighbors and they know, a certain neighbor just moved in and it's not reflecting on the tax bill, where they kind of question, well, that person's no longer living there. We still have to meet what we have. So we still tell them you have to send the mailing to that name at that address, but feel free to actually name your true neighbor too. You can always go above and beyond.
Right. I'm just trying, I mean, like neighbors were notified, all the buddies of that particular person, obviously. Yeah, go to Bob. Bob will say yes. So, but yeah, the other folks, and they were appalled by the structure that was built there. I'm sure they're used to it now. It's been a while. But so I'm just trying to figure out a way we can do that better and notify the folks who it would affect directly better. Another thing too is that because it used to be a tree farm and it was still kind of ag, even though it wasn't ag, it's no longer a tree farm over there, right? So because it's still in A1 zoning, that they could put this structure there because, it's a accessory building, and a building it is, but it looks nothing like the rest of the neighborhood. So even though there wasn't, I don't know, could something have jumped out and said, this is weird? Was there something to alert you? Dawn,
So
sorry.
at the meeting itself, where it starts at planning and zoning, should someone had a concern about that big structure, I would assume they would have came to the public
They
hearing,
didn't know, that's the point.
but
Well, they
there
did
should have
know.
been a sign.
There was a sign. They did know. They didn't know what.
They knew that the person was gonna replace the garage
Right.
that was already there, and that was fine.
So
They didn't know.
it worked.
They didn't know the size, they didn't know.
Because they didn't know that it was an agricultural property
So
that
the-
they can put a
Because-
huge.
But if there was a sign, I'm assuming there's a sign, and if they weren't advised by way of mail,
Right.
sign gives a phone number, what's this about? And I get those phone calls all the time. So should they have been alerted by the sign and been curious? It's a public hearing and
They
then
should
at
have
that
gone to the
point,
public hearing.
why wasn't I notified? And we get those at the public hearing also. And at that time, that's when we do the cross-check ballots. Sorry, your name. is-
The calling
They-
was, just so you know, the calling was done. And at that point, there was nothing that could be done. There was nothing could be done at that point. I think maybe some outline of that structure had started getting built and they're like, wait a minute, what? So it was after the fact until they
I
didn't
think
know.
the
until it
lesson
started
here
getting
is you go to the public hearing, even if you assume others rebuilding the garage that started on fire.
But,
built. Right.
but we've already discussed that perhaps adding purpose
Right.
to the sign would be beneficial.
To the
'Cause
sign
right
or
now-
the letter?
The
Huh?
sign.
To the sign, yep.
And it's not out of the ordinary. I've
That-
seen
that-
it on other
right.
signs. So it's not out of the
Yeah,
ordinary.
now, the problem is, how do we explain that? Usually it's variance to section 32 or whatever, but trying to 32 for the purposes of building a garage could.
Remember Sherry Berkowitz? Ogala.
Whoever I am today. I just was
I
wondering
didn't
that,
call her Julie.
so out in the country by me, I'm zipping down the road at 55 miles an hour. I see that sign, so obviously I'll stop to read it, because you can't read a sign at 55 miles an hour, but I do. So my question is, do we have a portal on the land use website where I could go in and enter ZC 24 1 2 3 4 5 and it could pop up to say, hey, they're looking at, because I don't know, is it a solar or are they just going to put up a house and stuff on an ag piece? I don't know. Everyone assumes solar, but it could be something else. Because I mean, I know who to call because I know all you guys. But if it's a resident, they may not know. And granted, we could, in our local papers, we could do a story and say, hey, we all have a new feature. And I know we're going to do websites coming up, which not tomorrow, obviously. But maybe that's a function we could put in to say, you know, we could advertise at some point when we talk about new websites and do that, which will be a while, but who cares? Hey, you can go here, put in ZC dash whatever, and then it could pop up with the information that anybody should have access to, not somebody's phone number or whatever. You don't want that, but you know, yeah, the parcel at such and such and such and such is going to have a mega building versus, you know, whatever else is. Would that be something? I mean, we don't do that today.
Don't do
right?
that today. No, our portal is called Dawn.
I know. Dawn, Marguerite, Brian, I know all the portals. I call them.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, actually. Yeah, this is always a topic that's been coming up for years on how to improve notification processes. And we're always willing to try to explore, new technology, or maybe there's different ways we can do things better. But kind of related to your question is we used to put a QR code on the sign. And people could scan it with their phone if they were out of their car or what they might do. But what we found is that realistically, what really was most effective was the phone number and the case number for somebody to call. But I mean, we're willing to look at other options. Maybe there's just better ways to do things. Perhaps there's something with SmartGov. And I think I've mentioned before too, we just don't have the technology now, but sometimes people can sign up. I've seen other jurisdictions where they have to spend money to do this, but they'll have a sign up for the notifications for zoning cases that are a certain radius from their house, or things like that. But that involves money to do that. But so there are other options, but just more related to that sign issue with information. We always found on the sign, the smaller signs that we hand out, a phone number and a case number is most effective. So,
Good deal. All right. Any final thoughts or things we want to have staff get back to us on before we move on? I think they hear us loud and clear. It sounds like they're open to improving the process. Have we given them anything today that it's going to, other than maybe?
Oh, yeah. We gave you something.
We'll see.
We just need more. There you go.
Okay.
All right, Chair.
Right, I think, because I believe I heard that they'll say whether it's a variance, whether it's a SAUP or a map amendment, and that really tells you a bit more. Because, it's a map amendment, that can be scary, especially use permit, and maybe I don't care that much if it's ag and they want to have a florist shop, or I don't know what it might be.
Yep. Oh,
I'm just a Joe Schmo. I don't know what a map amendment is. So you might want to say like zoning change, or, you gotta speak regular ease.
That was
Right.
the idea behind adding purpose to the signage.
all right. Good discussion. I don't have any report today. Any comments from other committee members? Any comments from anybody in the room?
I just want to say, Frankie, I think this was really excellent because we got to have a lot of conversation in a smaller room. And we don't have all the burdensome from all the land use cases, which would just get bogged down from. And you can't do this in a big committee
I agree.
with all that we have now. We were able to do that before, but what we have now on our agenda is just so time consuming. So I love this. So I would recommend we do this periodically for all the things, especially with Colin. He always gets ignored. He's always on the bottom of the agenda. It's like, oh, we don't have time.
Dawn, go ahead.
Question is, are we bringing these two topics back to the regular land use then committee to further discuss? Or another special?
Thoughts? I mean, we don't need another running agenda item, right? That we just, so maybe we revisit this in December or like put it on the agenda for December. Sound good?
Well, when will you guys be at the land use in December?
December is reorg.
It is. Yeah, the executive.
Well, on my way out, I want to put this on the agenda.
You would have time in November to do it like you did today.
That's fine. How about November? Let's put it on the November one, but don't make it
It's gonna take the proposals and move it to the regular committee.
yeah, sounds good. Agreed? Okay.
'Cause I heard a lot of stuff.
Any public comment today? Anybody here? Okay, need a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.